So our next reader is Angélique Jamail. Angélique's poetry and essays have appeared in over 24 anthologies and journals. Her magic realism novella, Finis, came out in 2014, and her poetry collection, The Sharp Edges of Water, came out in December 2018. You can find her online at her blog, Sappho's Torque. Angélique.
Hello, and hey, and both of those books that he referenced are on the table back there.
Right.
So,
How much are they?
oh, well, Finis is $6 and this one is $13.
Only 6/13.
I know, right?
You can't afford not to buy it.
How could you not do it? Anyway, thank you all for coming, and thank you for having me at the bookstore. This is exciting. I am from Houston. I also have a complicated relationship with Dallas, as everyone from Houston does. And
You're just at home. You just said that.
yeah, it's cool. They have a really great writing conference there, right? DFWCon, that's fun. So I'll read some poems, first from The Sharp Edges of Water. The first one is called Listening for Atlantis. Down this deep, debate over waves and particles can be settled. The light, granular, spotted by sand I've disturbed, has sunk too far to be tossed by rip currents above, and the fringe of my hair trickles like midnight behind me. Salt stings grit against my skin. Down here, more than quiet. Even the dense cold can't coax my ears into soundful vessels, leaves me the narrow trench of silence. Finding the royal of my own voice won't climb this steep, smooth slope any more than I can grind pearls to spice under my bare feet. In the foam green light, a seahorse, reluctant, divines his way toward me, his every watery breath an inconsequential sponge squeezed. The silent currents hide dunes, a city, an ecology of the mystical and mundane. Still I leap across the sand, a knot, an eddy, a pilgrim in the deepening dusk of loss. So this book it's a collection of poems. It's also a collection of stories, and together they all form sort of a loose narrative. And some of the poems are rooted in Houston, which is where I live and where I'm from, and some of them are about Los Angeles, where I lived and taught for several years, quite a while ago. And so I do want to read one of the Los Angeles poems to you tonight. This is A Brief and Envious History of Particle Physics. O painted, sun-glinting Mecca, every large, flat, vertical surface calls out to me with singular insistence. Den of airbrushed self-consciousness, studied perfection, your charmed denizens are real, real, real enough. I am torn into particular fragments. I adore your graceful hills, your mountains like jauntily sculpted mounds rising from the sleepy curves of the world, your determined blue sky, your laughable clouds, your cold ocean sucking at the hot sandy edge of the land, your palm trees stuck up from the ground like frilled toothpicks, your all-night pizza delivery diners, your recklessly entranced tourists, your warm expatriate Texans migrated west, staring in secret wonder at the generosity of your openness. I miss you, other home, landscape of my heart and welcoming witness to my strange quirks. I miss the self I was when you were mine. I miss the parts of me left languishing in the settles of your valleys. From the top stratum of violet air above the hills to the bottom of every car-studded canyon, I could give up each grain of pretense and spiral down into your exquisite sloping life. So I lived in LA a really long time ago. Like I was teaching there in the late 90s at Loyola Marymount. And, a whole other lifetime away. Now I live in Houston, I'm married, I have children, I have adolescent children, and I am hopeful that I will survive their adolescence. That would be awesome. They like roller skating. I like roller skating, so it's something we can do together. And this next poem, I wrote roller skating with them. We got off the rink and I went and typed it into my phone as fast as I could remember it. Upon taking my kids to the last roller rink left in Houston. I was a roller skating queen when I was 12. I knew all the rinks of this town like a master harper knows the pluck and tang of every singing string. Now, at a mortal 44, one busted tailbone in my past, my wheels feel every scratch and patch of this decades-old floor, every whoosh of every godlike adolescent zooming by. My hair blown back by the breeze of my own perched recklessness, I wish I had the brass ball bearings for roller derby. Commonly occurring in villages, in hamlets, and on hearths around our great land. 14 cows piled themselves onto the New Jersey Turnpike last Friday afternoon in homage to the first fair minutes of the new moon. Traffic stopped for miles on either side of these giant Holstein-spotted and udder-bearing nourishers who silently and with dignity intact walked into the middle of the road and climbed up onto each other's backs and closed their eyes, noses pressed into flanks and tails swishing tunnel flies from their neighbors' ears in compassionate solidarity. Not one single low moved through the confused air, but 14 pairs of mindful eyes tilted upward from behind 28 rows of silky brown lashes, as if looking through their blinders to the empty space in the too bright sky, to where the moon would have been if it were at the other end of its cycle, and hundreds of angry, confused, frustrated horns tried to break the splendor of the silent cows who held each other and would hold each other. Our demands will be met. So I don't know if it came across. I occasionally travel into the surreal with my poetry. My fiction is usually magic realism or fantasy, which Finis is. I will say that one of the characters in this book may or may not be a mermaid. So this is one of her poems, and this is called "Moving to Your Home." We've been sitting on the bed in the place where it rains every afternoon as a part of the natural order of things. The afternoons become evenings quickly here under the rainy sky. I recall an afternoon when a green sky made me want to crawl into bed and wait for the dark, wet evening to clean the greenness away with rain. The sky's light washed all of our things in a pale green bath, and a part of me wished we could make a departure from this place. Jump into the wet sky, let go of my blanket cocoon and all our things, keeping only the memory of our bed in a soon-to-be-swallowed land. I trembled for rain to wash the daylight out of the evening air, but the green tint slid even onto the darkness, partially dripped in sheets by the rain, partially a reflection on the sky of the wet trees. The window by the bed shook with the wind, and little things started to scare me. I packed a few things into a satchel in case we left for the evening to sleep in your old bed at your parents' house. They were never a part of the plan, but even I could not resist the sky's thundering, the ugly greenness of rain. Now, wrapped in the blanket, we watch the rain dripping rivers on the window. You reassure me our things will be safe in this house, under this sky, under our bed, and that we will stay home all evening. I'm not wild about the weather here, but I guess it's part and parcel of being with you, together in this bed, in this house, under this rainy sky, on an island where people leave their things under their beds, and the evening is part of the afternoon. And I'm going to read one more poem, which is not from Sharp Edges Water, which is actually from my next collection of poetry. So you get a little preview. Lucky you. Yay! I really appreciate the enthusiasm too. This poem is called Recipe for My Daughter. So I'm Lebanese, and the way that we and my family teach each other to cook is through telling stories. And that's how I learned to cook, that's how my daughter is learning to cook, that's how my mother learned to cook, my grandmother, etc., etc. So this one is called Recipe for My Daughter. When the pita dough does not rise, throw it away, remembering that yeast and flour are cheap, and start over again on a day without rain. When you become 7 years old, you will be given a new pair of tiny scissors with which you will snip the leaves from 10 bunches of parsley, taking care to keep the stems from the great silver bowl, while your mother chops the tomatoes and onions. When you manage this, despite the nauseating abundance of parsley, you will be allowed to mix in the barul. When you hollow out the yellow squash, measure the tender rind so your fingernail does not puncture the tiny gourd. When you roll the grape leaves, count 20 per guest, and remember a pinky's length of lamb and rice is plenty. When you boil them in the enormous pot, lay a dinner plate on top so that the roiling does not unroll your tightly wound creations. When you learn to make baklava, be careful to paint the melted butter across every thin sheet of phyllo separately. When you grind the pistachios, try not to scrape your knuckles on the glass each time you crank the lever around. When the bread finally rises, you will sit upon a wooden chair in front of the lower oven and announce its brief inflation as if every puffed up loaf were the Messiah. When it comes out of the upper oven, flat again with a pocket, spread butter and grape jelly on it and eat it so hot. When you are an adult, you will remember the smell as a joy. When you have become good enough, you will not have to measure anything ever again. When you grind the lamb for kibbe, reserve some to saute with pine nuts for the hashwe and run the rest through the grinder twice more with onions and barul. When you have a craving for kibbe naya, make it yourself and eat it the same day home from the butcher, and bless the dish before you pour the olive oil, because raw meat is not a thing to trust to just anyone. When your son brings home an American girlfriend, admonish his brothers for slopping it out in voluptuous mounds at her first dinner with the family. When your daughter-in-law first opens her home to you, bring her a great silver bowl, a new embroidered cloth, a carton of sea salt, and a bulbous witch doll to hang over the sink. When you take the lemony, warm spinach pies to school for lunch, you will not have to share them with the other children. And one day, you will appreciate having had them all to yourself.